Tonight's shiur, as always, Lilu Nishmat Avi Marido, Ber Meir Ben Ruben Halevi, Imi Marati, Rachel Bat Harav Michael. And tonight, of course, we'll be talking about parshat Chukat. And let's get everything up on the screen, and we will get started. The beginning of parshat Chukat begins with the law of the Para Aduma, which, according to most of the Parshanim and most of the schools of thought that we have, is what I would call the quintessential Chok. What's that? The screen died? Oh, 1 minute. Hold on a minute. We're having. Oh, why is it not?
In January 2017 in an interview because he could not corroborate the dossier.
There, and as I started to say, we are Parshat Chukat talks about Paraduma, which begins very interestingly by Dabar Hashem al Moshe el Aaron Lamor, very simple pasuk. Hashem speaks to Moshe and Aaron. Makes sense, but it says beginning of the first three words are Zod Chukat HaTorah. This is a Chukah of the Torah. Hashem Lamor, that Hashem has commanded us saying. Now it's interesting because we have the word Lamor twice here in the first two psukim. We just said Vaydaber Hashem Moshe Aaron Lamor, and now again it says Sher Tziva Hashem Lamor. Again, why do we have the word Lamor twice? We're going to see the parsha, and we're going to address that, I hope. And then we're told Daber Bnei Yisrael, we should speak to Bnei Yisrael. B'chaylecha Para Aduma, they have to take a Para Aduma, a red para, a red cow, Tamima, that is pure or whole. What tamima means, we're not going to address tonight, but basically means it has to be completely red to the extent that even if it has two non-red hairs, it's not valid. Now, what red is? Does it have to be cherry red, fire engine red? Does it have to be beige red? I have no idea what the laws are. I'm not a color expert. That's my wife's the color and decoration expert. But either way, it had to be some shade of red, so that it was completely red, and it also has all these other requirements. For those of us who haven't studied it, we'll give you a very brief, because I'm going to go through this very quickly, because I want to focus on the fact of the whole concept of Zod Chukat Torah, so we're going to focus on tonight. The mitzvah of the Paraduma is that we take this, we slaughter it outside of the precincts of the Beit HaMikdash. It is then burned completely, and the ashes are going to be used to purify somebody who has come in contact with a dead body. That's the purpose of the ashes of the Paraduma. We take the ashes, we mix it with water. Mayim Chayim has to be spring water. And then you take that spring water with the ashes, you sprinkle it on the person who has come in contact with a mate. The ashes are left separately. You take spring water, you put some ashes in it, you mix them together, you sprinkle the mixture on the people who have come in contact with the dead. As a matter of fact, it's very interesting. The Mishnah describes the procedure. You could have one person standing on a first level window and 100 people standing below it, and they give one sprinkle, and a drop lands on everybody. They all become pure. If you get a drop, all you need is one drop, but you have to have it done twice. The third day after you come in contact with the mate, the seventh day. And then at the end of the seventh day, you can then become tahor by going to the mikvah. Who's counting all the hairs on it? The Kohen, before he's going to slaughter it, is going to check. Oh, he's not. He doesn't have to count the hairs. He has to make sure that there aren't two non-red hairs. If he finds two hairs that aren't red, that's it. He's got to go to the next count. Where are they? I don't know. Yes, they have a whole bunch of potential paradumot that they've set aside, waiting for Mashiach to come to tell us which one will be the appropriate one. You're right. I don't know. I don't know. Well, I'm sure today there's probably an app, Paraduma Watch, will tell you where it is, how it's doing, and they have to be an appropriate age. Once they get too old, that's it. If they're beyond a certain age, you can't use it. If they're too young, they can't use it. So there are all sorts of halachot. I don't want to get into all the halachot of Paraduma. I really just wanted to focus on the basic essentials. because I really want to focus on this concept of Zot Chukat HaTorah. What does it mean, Zot Chukat HaTorah? What does it mean? This is a chok. Generally, by the way, and then later on it says Zot HaTorah. This is the Torah. This is the laws. If a person dies, there's a special type of tumah associated with a corpse that applies to no other type of tumah. That is called tumat ohel. Tumah of being in the same, literally the same tent, under the same tent as a corpse. So it's most tumot, you have to either touch it, carry it, or move it in some way. Those are the three ways we generally contract tumah. For example, if I have a dead animal that contracts tumah, such as certain types of the shmona shrotzim, the 8 types of rodents that or whatever you want that contract tumah when they are dead. I'm sorry?
One of them.
Or a toad, there's a weasel, whatever way we translate these shmona shrotzim. Each of them, you can't, if you pass by one of them without touching it, without moving it, you're not tameh. But a corpse, all you have to do is be in the same room, same covered area, or all you have to do is walk over it. If there's a corpse in the middle of the road and you step over it, you become tameh because you have formed a covering over the corpse. If there is a tree over a corpse and you walk under that same tree branch, you become tameh of oel because you are under the same tree branch as a corpse. As a matter of fact, if you go to certain cemeteries in Yerushalayim that have signs, Kohanim go across the street because there are branches sticking out from the cemetery over graves that also overhang the street. If a Kohen walks under one of those branches, he becomes tameh. Only with a corpse is that concept of oel. That's why we have this word here, Zot HaTorah, to specifically tell us this Torah only applies, this law applies only to tumah transmitted by a corpse. Human corpse, not an animal corpse. Now, this phrase, Zot Chukat, only appears 3 times in the entire Torah. Once in our parsha, another time in Shemot, chapter Yudbet, that's in Parshat Bo, where it tells us Zot Chukat HaPesach. These are the laws of Pesach. And the third time is the laws of Taharat Tfilat Kelim, that when I acquire a metal utensil from a non-Jew, Zot Chukat Torah, the law of the Torah, again, a chok of the Torah, is that it has to be immersed in a mikvah. The whole concept of Tfilat Kelim, when you purchase utensils from Goyim, comes from this halacha here in Bamidbar. Those are the only 3 times in the whole Torah it says Zot Chukat together. Those 2 words appear one after the other. The phrase Zot HaTorah also appears numerous times. And I just brought down a few of them. In Vayikra, we have Zot HaTorah Lo'olala Mincha V'Lachatat, Zot HaTorah in Parshat Tazria, Mitzorah, Zot HaTorah L'chol Negat Zarat. And we have once in the Torah, Vizot HaTorah, pasuk we're all familiar with, Zot HaRasher Samo Shelifnei B'nei Yisrael. Those are the only times that we have Zot together with either Chukat or with Torah. Now, Rashi tells us very simply that the reason it specifically connects this mitzvah, this mitzvah paraduma, to the word Chukat HaTorah is because it is, as I said, the quintessential halacha, quintessential law of the Torah for which we have no idea what the rationale is. And Rashi brings this down. He says, "Lefisha Satan bi'umot ha'olam monim et Yisrael lomar," because the Satan, the accuser, and the nations of the world will try to bother us, question this halacha, because to say, "Ma mitzvah hazot u'ma tam yesh ba," what is this illogical, irrational mitzvah, and what's the reason for it? Lefikach, therefore, katav b'chuka, therefore it says it is a chok, it is a law that has no explanation. Gezerah hi milefanai. Hashem says this is a decree that I have made. V'ein lecha reshut leharher acharel. You have no permission to even try to understand it and try to fathom its rationale. Rashi is of the opinion that we're not supposed to try to understand why this mitzvah is there. That doesn't stop other parshanim from trying to give some rationalizations and some explanations of this mitzvah. We're not going to get into too many of those, but hopefully we'll see a little bit of background on what this mitzvah is all about. Why are we talking about, I'm sorry, a what? Metals. That's a different Zot Chukat HaTorah. No. The concept of Zot Chukat HaTorah is, but we talk about metal utensils that are bought from a non-Jew in a mikvah. Koshering, no, if you buy a new metal utensil, never used from a non-Jew, nothing to do with koshering it. Yes, obviously, if you buy a used utensil from a non-Jew, you have to kosher it first. But even after it's been koshered, you have to bring it to the mikvah. Tavilat kalim has nothing to do with whether the keli was used for non-kosher food or not. Totally different mitzvah. Okay. What do you do first? First, you kosher the kalim, and then you take it to the mikvah. Generally. And I'm sure if you do it backwards, it's okay. Okay, now, Sifsei Chachamim is bothered by and wants to understand why did Rashi, what forced Rashi, what was bothering Rashi that he decided to say that this whole concept of Zot Chukat HaTorah, what's wrong with the language? Why was there something about the language? And Chachamim brings down the following: the Kashalei, Rashi was perplexed by Lama Kativ Milat Chukat uMilat HaTorah. Why do I need both the word Chukah? It's a statute and HaTorah. Why do I need both? And why couldn't it just say Zot HaTorah or Zot HaChukah? Why does it need both? Devadai Chukat o Torah echad l'chut lo kasha l'Rashi. Because clearly Rashi has no problem in general when we use the phrase Zot HaTorah or Zot Chukat. He doesn't have a problem. It's only when the two come together that he has this problem. And Sifsei is going to say, there are many times in the Torah where the word chok appears, and Rashi doesn't come up with this explanation that says, oh, the nations bother us, and this is a specific thing that the nations bother us about, therefore we need it. The pasuk we just discussed, this is the laws of the Pesach. If you'll follow my chukim. The Milat HaTorah, and the word HaTorah, Zot HaTorah, appears many times also. Many times we have the phrase Zot Torah, HaTorah, Zot Torah. This is the law of. Avakan, here in our pasuk, Ksiv Zot Chukat HaTorah, therefore it's kosher. Rashi was bothered, Lama li tarvayu. Why do I need both of them? Therefore, he gives up this explanation that this is a gezerah, this is something we're not allowed to inquire into the reason. Okay, that's enough. That's Sifsei Chachamim. Okay. Now, Sifsei Chachamim goes a little bit further. He says the following. The Af al Gav, even though Kol HaTorah Kula Hi Gezerat Melech, Rashi just says that the law of Para Aduma is a Gezerat Melech. It's a decree of the king. We're not allowed to question it. We're not allowed to investigate it. Silchon is bothered. He says every mitzvah of the Torah is Hashem's decree. It's Hashem deciding, this is what I want you to do. It's a gezerah of the king. We might think we understand some of them, or maybe many of them, but every mitzvah of the Torah has nuances that seemingly are incomprehensible, whatever they might be. This mitzvah, unlike other mitzvah where we can possibly understand part of the rationale, this mitzvah of Para Aduma has no logical, rational reason. Rak HaGezerah, only the Gezerah part, whereas every other mitzvah has a rational part and a part that this is a Gezerah from Hashem. V'roi leKabbalah, af she'ein tam klal noda liYisrael. Even though we B'nai Yisrael have no way to understand what the rationale of this is, nonetheless, we have to accept it. And that's Rashi's explanation. That's why Rashi feels it necessary to explain that the reason why the Torah specifically tells us that this mitzvah has no rationale, or we should not investigate it, is so that we have an answer to give to the Goyim. Wait a minute. I just brought two different pesukim that say the phrase Zot Chukat Torah. One of them is here. The second one was the law of Tfilat Kalim. Why doesn't Rashi give the same explanation there, that the laws of Tfilat Kalim have no rationale, and therefore we have the same problem? That is a chok. That's a law. Is there any rationale for it? We don't know what the rationale is. That's what the Torah says. Torah when it comes to the law of Tfilat Kalim. But the Sifsei Chacham says Parashi over there in his commentary on the law of Tfilat Kalim doesn't bring the same thing, that all the world is complaining and they bother us about this mitzvah. Why doesn't it say the same thing? The Yesh Lomar and Sifsei Chacham says, by the way, when it says Zot Chukat Torah over there, it's not talking about the law of Tfilat Kalim. That's what he wants to say. Over there, wait, 1 minute. Rashi, by the law of Tfilat Kalim, doesn't bring down this same question of why does it say Zot Chukat Torah. So the Sifsei Chacham says, well, wait a minute, why doesn't Rashi? So there must be something else that was bothering Rashi. He says, no. That the Zot Chukat Torah that we have by Tfilat Kalim, he says, also refers back to the Para Aduma. Why? Because in the parsha of Tfilat Kalim, we are told before, as Loa said, we have to kasher it before, but also in the case of the war of Midian, we also had to take these Kalim, they also had to be sprinkled in the blood of the Paraduma this one time. That's not the norm. The norm is you don't have to take the ashes from the Paraduma and sprinkle them over Kalim that you're buying from a guy or purchasing from a guy. Here, because the war with Midian, there were so many people killed, they had all of the Kalim required tahara, as though they had come in contact with the dead, and go in the mikvah, and kashering, obviously. So it required an extra step of requiring purification in addition to kashering and in addition to going to the mikvah. Well, if you midrash Rabbeinu Zal the koyach roach b'meinida yitchatat. However, that's one opinion. He says the second opinion. Wait a minute. That pasuk of meinida yitchata is not to tell us that it has to be sprinkled with the ashes of paraduma. It's to tell us that it has to go to the mikvah. The meinida is referring to a mikvah. What is meinida? The water that a nida has to go to tovel in is what you have to take these kalim to, a kosher mikvah. So according to this midrash, atfila av lachshiran mina isor hitin tfila liklimat tachot. We require tefillah for all metal kalim. So we're going to have to answer that. Why doesn't Rashi? So now we're back to the original question. Why didn't Rashi have the same problem with that pasuk and say, oh, because the world shouldn't bother us? The gama tefillah atzma he me'otan she'ein bam tam. Tefillah is also, in other words, Rashi's reason here that he says to paraduma will apply to going to a mikveh too. Because bringing your kalim to a mikveh just because you bought them from the guy has the same non-rational aspects that the mitzvah paraduma has. We don't understand why we have to take kalim to a mikveh because the Torah says so. That's why we do it. Lama, and he goes even further because the mikveh is even stranger. Lama lo yoyel elef sa shalom makom tefillah. If I wash we know that if I take these metal utensils to a mikveh that has the requisite amount of water in it, they become tahor, right? They become purified from the fact that I bought them from a guy. Why wouldn't it be enough to throw them in my bathtub? Why do I need to take them to a mikveh? Why can't I throw them in my swimming pool? So that is just theoretically, is just as irrational as the mitzvah of the paraduma. So therefore, Rashi isn't bothered by the fact that it says Zot Chukat Torah because he's already explained it here. Okay. Gabriel, please stop playing with my computer. Okay. Rashbam. Rashbam says, why does it say Zot Chukat Torah? He says that Zot Chukat Torah, the word the Torah here is referring to another point in our parsha, and it's telling us that it is as if it had said Zot Chukat Hatumah, but it didn't want to use the word Zot Chukat Hatumah. Later on, we're going to see that the law of the Para Aduma applies to a person who dies, a corpse that needs to be buried, that you contract Tumah from. Kilomar Chukat HaTorah she'omar lamata Zot HaTorah. concerning the pasuk later on that says Zot HaTorah. This is the law of a person who dies and how one contracts tuma from him. That is what this is parsha. Talk about paraduma tziva lakachat. Therefore, we have a command to take the paraduma. Lasot Torah taharato shel adam ki amut ba'ohel. So that when a person dies, we can become pure from coming in contact with him. Litarbo, nogeya, v'nosei, umahahio. 3 different ways that one can contract tumah from a corpse. One by touching it, the other by carrying it, and the third is by, as we said, being in the same tent with it, or passing over it or passing under it. So all of those things. So Rashbam says there's no real problem with Zot Chukat Torah. It's as if it had said Zot Chukat Tarat Mitame Mate, but it uses a brief word and to point us to later on in the parsha where the Torah uses the word HaTorah to tell us what the paraduma is all talking about. We shouldn't have a problem with the word Zot Chukat HaTorah. But Ezra goes off on a different thing just to explain very simply. If we look at this parsha, it seems as if that we didn't get the law of paraduma until after the rebellion of Korach and after all these other the thin and the Meraglim. Ibn Ezra says, no. You shouldn't think that this parsha is given in chronological order. This is not its location in chronological order. Gamzot ha-parsha b'midbar Sinai Nemra. This was told before they left Har Sinai. This is one of the original. It's part of the Torah that was given before the Mishkan. When the day the Mishkan was set up, and Hashem talked about what the requirements of setting up the camp were at the beginning of Sefer Bamidbar, that's when this mitzvah was given. And certainly when we read when they made the Korban Pesach in the year 2, there were obviously Tamei Meitim who had to be sprinkled with the ashes of the paraduma to become tahar. So we see clearly that this mitzvah is not in order. So the question now is, anytime we have a parsha in the Torah that's not in chronological order, we have to explain why. So he says, because the last thing we read about in Parshat Korach was how everybody was complaining about the fact that Aaron had been appointed Kohen. And then we had all the laws pertaining to the different gifts and different privileges of the Kohanim. Therefore, this parsha is here because we're talking about laws of Kohanim. In reality, should have been in Sefer Vayikra with all the rest of the laws of Tuma and Tahara, but it's not. It's left to be put here. So that's what Ibn Ezra wants us to understand. He goes further, but that's what we called it. Okay, I'm going to skip Bechor Shabbat. All right, Bechor Shor tells us very simply that Zot Chukat HaTorah, the word HaTorah there doesn't mean of the Torah. It means Chok Shel Hora'ah. It means a law that is related to teaching. What is it trying to teach? What is the whole purpose of this law of paraduma? It's in relation to becoming impure, tamei, through contact with a mate. So he wants to understand, Bechor Shor wants us to understand, why is it that the Torah places such strict rules about corpse, about dead people, and how we contract tuma from them. The reason is lefi shelo yehyu b'nei adam mitzuyim eitzel mitoteim mitoch chibatam, that we should. The reason we become tamei by coming in contact with a dead body is so that we should not delay removing the dead body from our midst. We should not want to keep the dead body present because of our love for them. We want to keep them around. The yitzaru yoter midai, and this will cause us great grief. The whole Jewish process of mourning, that's what Bechor Shor tells us, that's what this whole thing is all about. The reason we have tum'ah associated with a mate is so that we will bury people quickly, remove them, and we will begin the healing process of moving on in our lives from this loved one who we have lost. Yes, Lois.
Look at dead bodies. They're really advanced. They age faster.
Okay, Lois said that there was an article in the Jerusalem Post that some research study that was done that ants who stay around, hang around dead ants, age faster than ants who don't hang around dead ants. I wouldn't surprise me. They're worried about. Go ahead.
So you keep the body 3 days. And another
Yes,
not healthy.
it is
according
not
to-
healthy. Yes, according to this research, it's not healthy. That's interesting, very interesting. I'll tell you a story. You brought this. I wasn't going to bring this up, but many, many years ago, I happened to work with a non-Jewish person who had somebody in their family passed away. And when this person came back to work, she said to me, "You Jews got it right." You know, it was so agonizing going through this whole period of the wake and making the person look like they're really still alive. And it really bothered her. She said, "You Jewish people have it right. You get the person dead, and then you go through the grieving process, and it helps and it works." So yeah, but parshat very simply tells us we would want to keep the dead around as we see. That's what the Goyim do, as like you just said. Go and keep the dead person around and try to make him look still like they're still alive, and they try to make him look beautiful before they bury him. And that's exactly what the Torah doesn't want us to do. That's one reason. Number two reason, inami, another possible reason. Shaloyu dorshim el hametim ubalei ov hichmir hakasim betumat meit yotem mikol tumot sheba olam. The Torah was stricter with the tumah that emanates from a corpse than any other tumah that comes alive. Lasoto aviavot hatuma. It is a super tuma. A corpse is a super tuma. Shemetame adam mekalim afetam be'olel v'yosachev k'chol. It has all sorts of stringencies associated with a corpse as it comes to transmitting tumah. The af. So that's another reason that we shouldn't doresh al hametim. We shouldn't go into necromancy. If the dead person's around, let's pull a bone out here and go into all these other superstitious practices. Another reason why we want to have tumah associated with a corpse, so we will refrain from getting involved in all of this type of activity, all of which is forbidden as idolatrous practices. Okay, another reason. Well, I don't want to get into that. Well, that's a whole different issue. And another reason, they kavod habariyot. One of the reasons we want to bury the dead and give them proper do that is because of the honor and respect due to the body. So yasu me oram no dot ushtichim, that we shouldn't say, we use animal skin for leather. Why shouldn't we use human skin? Make human leather accoutrements. Whether it's in his days, he's talking about water bags and coverings for tents. So too today we make them into handbags and shoes and whatever. Okay, so another reason why we want to we want dead to be tamei, so that we will not utilize them, and that which is disgraceful for a dead person to say, turn somebody else into something you're going to use. Similarly, we would use their bones we would turn their bones into boneware, utensils, or behemoth, not so much, just like we use animal bones and animal skin to make utensils out of. This is very, very disrespectful to people. Similarly, the Chazal said, why does a person's skin tamei? A person will be so attached to their parents who want to turn their skin into something that stays close to him all the time. So he shouldn't make jewelry out of his parents' bones, so they'll always be with him. And the more beloved someone is, the more tamei it is. We'll see. Okay, I think we get the idea here. That's the whole point. That whole point he's saying is that we want people to be tamei, so we don't interact with dead bodies. That we remove them as quickly as possible. Okay. Ramban as usual starts with Rashi's explanation. Why does it say Zod Chukat HaTorah? Again, Lefisha Satan V'Yomod Olam Mon Yisrael. The same thing we just quoted. Gezeri Himel Fanai. That's Lashon Rashi. And Rashi, by the way, he says this is quoted from the Gemara in Yom. Farkatavti be'inyan se'ir amishtalech. We have another very, very strange halacha. The halacha of the goat that is sent out to the desert on Yom Kippur, Sa'ir Mishtaleach, which also is called a chok. Also, so we don't understand. Why is it that all karbanot are brought to the Beit HaMikdash? the shiur on the Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, we take a goat, instead of slaughtering it in the Beit HaMikdash, we bring it out to this cliff somewhere and we throw it off a cliff. What kind of nonsense is that? It seems nonsense. It's nonsense. I mean, it's because the Torah says so. But again, if I were looking at this from a logical, rational perspective, it doesn't seem that there's any logic to that. So Ramban says, I've already written concerning this. I don't understand why this would bother the goyim any more than any other mitzvah. There are lots of mitzvot involved in karbanot. Why should paraduma or the shiur mishaleach bother the goyim any more than any other karban? Sheichapru, because they achieve atonement. The yesh me'am shitaru karbanot hazava yoledes. There are certain karbanot that are brought as a part of a purification process, and there are some karbanot that are brought as part of an atonement process. Those are the two types of karbanot we have. Why should I think that the shiur mishaleach is part of an atonement process? Why is that any different than any other karban that's part of an atonement process? So Ramban over there explains, since the whole service is outside of the Beit HaMikdash, since it's outside of the Beit HaMikdash, right? Therefore, it seems as though we're bringing a karban to Avodah Zarah. We're bringing a karban not to Hashem. All the karbanot we bring to Hashem are brought in the Beit HaMikdash. This shiur, which is brought outside the Beit HaMikdash, it appears to the goyim like we're bringing a karban to Avodah Zarah. Same thing with the paraduma. Ramban says that it's the whole if it's not burned in the Beit HaMikdash, the goyim who see it, because now the goyim can see it, it's not in the Beit HaMikdash. The goyim see us, they say, oh, we're bringing korban to Avodah Zarah. That's why the Torah says Zot Chukat HaTorah. In reality, the purpose of both of these is to remove the ruach hatumah. The paraduma is to remove the ruach of tumah, usreifata, and it's burning outside the precincts of the Beit HaMikdash. Kareach nichoach bachutz. Is if I brought a korban to Hashem, just like I bring in the Beit HaMikdash, by bringing this outside the Beit HaMikdash and following Hashem's command that it be brought outside the Beit HaMikdash, it's as if I'm bringing, it's like any other korban. The Tam Tumat Hamet. Ramban goes the whole reason why we have this whole concept of Tumat Hamet. He says Be'etjo Shel Nachash. All because of the Nachash tricked Chava into eating from the Eitz Hadas. People who die through HaKadosh Baruch Hu because they had to die because they're mortal. People who are tzaddikim shouldn't transmit tumah, but realistically, because the tzaddik should not transmit tumah. However, therefore, this is a chok, the word chok comes from the word lachok, to be engraved, to be etched. In other words, we derive it by it's derived from the Torah Sheba al Peh. It is derived from the Torah Sheba al Peh. We have that there is tumah associated with every human being because of the original sin, the sin of humanity. That we have to because what? Okay. Al Kain, he paravi aduma miminat hadin. It has to be read by law because red represents sin, as opposed to white, which represents purity. And again, he says, okay, we'll skip that part. All right, let's continue with. All right, we're going to go to the the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. Now, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh has a very, very interesting perspective here on the whole concept. Excuse me, if I can ask everybody on the Zoom to please mute because there's somebody has some background noise that's very disturbing. Thank you. Okay. Zot Chukat HaTorah, Orach Chaim wants to know, Tzorich Ladat, Lama Kina Lemitzvazu Shem Klalot HaTorah. Why doesn't it just say Zot Chukat? Why Zot Chukat HaTorah? Zot Chukat HaTumah. Zot Chukat HaTahara. This is the law of Tameh or Tamar. Kederach Amr Zot Chukat HaPesach. Like to the other time we have Zot Chukat HaPesach. This is the law of Pesach. Why Zot Chukat HaTorah? Now, maybe the Or Chaim wants to say, well, maybe the Zot Chukat, the law is that I can't study Torah if I'm Tameh Meit. He says that can't be the reason. Reason can't be because the words of Torah cannot acquire Tumah. So if I'm Tameh and I learn Torah, I don't make the words of Torah Tumah. So I'm allowed to learn Torah even though I am Tameh. And he says, therefore, all of them agree. These bar Inyan.
Not counting Quintessential.
Takonis, as we mentioned, as we said, Afilu Machmirin, that's only Tefillah. That's not. Firstly, that's not Torah. And even those that are even more Machmir by Balkari learning Torah, he says that's Tumat Yotzei Migufo, not Tamei Meit, which is everybody, even those who are Machmir and Balkari, which is because that's a Tamei Shosam of Migufo. That's a Tumah that comes from somebody personally, as opposed to Tamei Meit, which is an external Tumah that I contract by being in contact or proximity to. They are allowed to learn Torah. Everybody agrees, he says.
When someone dies and you hire someone to say someone, is the body covered at that point?
Wait, what do you mean? Wait, what? No. When they're doing Shmirah, during pre-burial, when you're doing Shmirah, somebody is saying, generally the body is covered. Yes. And you're not standing in front of a corpse that's not covered. Yes. Okay, now to explain the whole concept of Tamei Meit and why it says Zot HaTorah, Zot HaTorah, what is the connection of Torah to Tamei Meit? This is how he's going to explain it, Or Chaim says. We say the following in the last chapter of Nazir, a goy cannot contract tamei from a corpse. Only Jews become tamei when they become in contact with the corpse. So if a goy touches a corpse and then touches you, you don't become tamei because the goy is not tamei. He can't make you tamei, even though if a Jew touches a corpse and then touches you, you do become tamei. If a goy touches a corpse and touches you, you don't become tamei because the goy cannot become tamei, and therefore he can't transmit that tumah to you. A guy who is in contact with a dead body or carries a dead body or is in the same room as a dead body, it's as if he wasn't in the room with the dead body. It's as if an animal touched the dead body. So there's no difference between a goy and an animal. So a goy cannot contract tumat meit. That's the end of the halacha of the Rambam. Now he says the Or Chaim HaKadosh is the following. What is it that differentiates the Jewish people from the rest of the world? That the rest of the world cannot become Tamei Meit, and we the Jewish people can? It is through our acceptance of the Torah. Without accepting the Torah, the Jewish people is just like any other nation if we haven't accepted the Torah. Therefore, it says Zot Chukat Torah, this law of contracting of mate through being contacting Tumah by being in contact with a dead body is because we are Bnei Yisrael and we've accepted the Torah. That is exactly what makes this. That's why it says Zot Chukat Torah. This whole law of paraduma that I require to be purified when I come in contact with a corpse is all because we accepted the Torah. It doesn't apply to any of the rest of the world because they don't have this whole law. It's Zot Chukat Torah. And now to Amnu Tzuf Devash Imrayah. Through this we can get a taste of the sweetness of the mitzvah of Hashem. Masha Amar Zot Chukat Torah, that it uses the phrase Zot Chukat Torah. Perush Chukazu Shel Hatumah tonight Harata Tisovev Mehat Torah. This whole concept of Tumah by coming in contact with a dead body and how we become purified is only because of the Torah. Kal Yidei Shekiblu HaTorah Nasu in Bnei Yisrael in that through acceptance of the Torah, we who are low are able to try to have some connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the sanctity and the kedusha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu through our neshama, b'chayim, v'gam b'motam, through our life and through our death. How? Through our life. By shenogea beis o yalhilu af tedoma tivdavek b'matuma shebemeit lo tachbotz liparid im lo b'koach gadol asher chakak Hashem mitzvah hamur b'nyan shel paraduma. Requires this great exertion on our part to return from the impurity of the dead body. While we are alive, we have to go through this purification process, and that helps bring us closer to Hashem, to Kedusha. When we die, again, because people will refrain from getting too close to us after we've been buried, therefore, again, we the neshama, can acquire closeness to Hashem. Okay, and that's why it says, that's why we have this halacha that says Yisrael mitamin ba'ol ve'ein umot ha'olam mitamin ba'ol. Again, to this whole tumah of a corpse only applies to Am Yisrael. All right, I'm going to skip a little bit to go to the point I wanted to make here. Okay, it's interesting. He brings as a proof to this whole theory that the whole concept of tumat mate is only after we've accepted the Torah. He wants to compare, he looks back to the first Pesach, when the Jews were in Egypt. Now we know normally there are 3 requirements one has to go through before one can bring a korban Pesach. If one is male, he has to be circumcised. If he's not circumcised, he can't eat a korban Pesach. He has to be, going to mikveh. He has to be kosher. But again, we see in Mitzrayim, there was no concept of they had to go to the mikveh. They did not have to go. They only had to make sure they had Brit Milah, and then they could bring the korban Pesach. So we had 2 times it says, the pasuk says, "Ve'ever alayich verach mitpossesses b'damayich v'yomalach b'damayich chayi v'yomalach b'damayich chayi." This pasuk that we quote in Haggadah concerning the korban Pesach, the blood of the korban Pesach, and the dam of Brit Milah. Those 2 were brought down that they had to do in Mitzrayim. However, it does not say al din gimel shu'atuma lo matzinu shikvir Hashem, concerning the fact that they had to undergo purification from being in contact with the dead body. The Torah did not specify that they had to do in Pesach Mitzrayim, because in theory there was no way they could have done that. There was no paraduma then. And he says, well, they could have brought a paraduma, whatever. But the fact is, from there he wants to prove that since they had not yet accepted the Torah, because they were still in Egypt, they hadn't gotten to Har Sinai yet, Yisrael lo hayu tmei meit, because they were still viewed as goyim, they hadn't accepted the Torah yet, they were not tamei meit, because the whole concept of tamei meit comes only after acceptance of the Torah. The reason they weren't tamei meit because they hadn't yet accepted the Torah. So he wants to bring this as a proof that the whole purpose of, or the whole laws of Tuma and Tara associated with the corpse are all only part of the Torah after we accept the Torah. Okay, and then he brings other proofs from the Pesach. Now, Ubederech Remes, he wants to give it, the Torah is hinting to us, Yirtza be'omer Chukat HaTorah, by associating this whole mitzvah of paraduma with the word Chukat HaTorah. It's a incomprehensible, not necessarily, you will not be able to understand this halacha. She'im yekaimu mitzvazu, that if we, the Jewish people, will observe this mitzvah of para aduma and all the laws associated with corpse impurity, hagam yota chukah below tam, even though it's a chok without any rationale and reason behind it. It will count as if we have kept all of the Torah that Hashem has commanded us. Because fulfilling this mitzvah that we don't understand the reason for, Yagid HaTzikat HaEmunah will testify to our strength of faith, askamat nefesh, and the acceptance of our soul, kaim kol mitzvat habore, to observe all of the Torah, all of Hashem's commandments. This is your sign. If we keep a mitzvah that we don't understand, well, obviously we're going to keep the mitzvahs we do understand. So this is, by saying Zot Chukat Torah, Hashem is saying that by observing this mitzvah and this group of mitzvot, you will have achieved and showing of faith that you believe in Hashem and will observe all of the mitzvot. Perhaps this is why Hashem wanted this mitzvah to be given as a chok, as a reason, because Hashem certainly could have explained the reason to Moshe, just like he explains other mitzvot reasons. But he doesn't, specifically so that we should use this as, again, as the paradigmatic chok, and by observing it, we show that we will accept all Hashem's mitzvot, even those we will never understand. He goes a little bit further, the Orach Chaim, and says, by the way, okay. That he says every mitzvah that we think we understand the reason, we only understand part of the reason. Why? Zehu tam hanigla. We only understand the revealed reason. We know we keep Shabbos because Hashem created the world and rested on Shabbos. We know we keep Yontif because Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, or Hashem gave us the Torah, or whatever the reason is. We know that we don't steal because it's necessary for society. But that's only the revealed reason. The ein lacha mitzvah she'ein bo od sodot ne'elamim haniglim lemoshe u'yadav roi hamastik liknot kinyan haTorah. We know that every mitzvah, even those we think, oh, it's obvious, we understand exactly why there's this mitzvah, that's only the revealed reason. Every mitzvah has secrets hidden within it that are only revealed to Moshe and to other people of high righteousness and high intellect who are able to reach high levels of understanding of the Torah. As we learn in Pirkei Avot, there are 48 levels of acquiring the Torah, 48 things that are through which the Torah can be acquired. She'az, once you've achieved all of those 48 things, Megalin lo razei Torah, Hashem will reveal to you the secrets of the Torah. Shegil Hashem leMoshe b'Sinai, they were revealed to Moshe at Sinai. U'Moshe gam ken gil Yisrael b'nei Doro sodat hanis tarim. Moshe also revealed to his generation some of these hidden reasons. The Tami mitzvot yisod kol davar. However, again, that's like every mitzvah has two things. So by saying this is a chukah and you're supposed to tell Bnei Yisrael this is a chok, it's as if Hashem told Moshe, Hashem commanded Moshe to tell them, Hashem commands Moshe, you might understand, I will let you understand this mitzvah, but don't tell anybody else. This one you can't share with the rest of the people. That's what it means. And that's why we have the word lemor twice. At the beginning, that's what Al-Quran wants to say. The reason that lemor is at the beginning of the pasuk twice is to tell us, Hashem tells Moshe and Aaron, Zod Chukat Torah, Asher Tziv Hashem, lemor. I'm commanding you to tell the Bnei Yisrael that this is a chok. That's why it says lemor twice. First, he tells them that you have to tell Bnei Yisrael this mitzvah, but he says also tell them that it's a chok, that they will never understand the reason for it. You, Moshe, you can understand the reason for it, but everybody else can't, because I want them to have this mitzvah to show their faith, and that's really the reason we keep all the mitzvot. And that's exactly what Orach Chaim HaKadosh is trying to explain to us, that by keeping these mitzvot that we don't understand the reason for, we are really saying that all the mitzvot we don't fully understand. We might understand some of the revealed reasons, but we certainly don't understand all the hidden reasons behind every one of the mitzvot. And that is exactly why all of the mitzvot, even the ones that we do understand the revealed reasons for, we still have to keep in all the details, because that's how we testify that we understand that there are hidden reasons. We don't understand what they are yet. Maybe someday we will, but right now we don't, but we keep them anyway. And that's, I think, the whole concept of Zot Chukat Torah, is to tell us that every mitzvah has a little bit of chok in it, a little bit of understanding that we will never attain in that mitzvah itself. No matter how much we think, oh, that's an easy mitzvah, we certainly understand that. We don't understand it completely. We will understand part of it. And yet still we keep all the mitzvot, because by keeping the mitzvot, we are elevating ourselves to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when we are able to get all of Am Yisrael on the same page of keeping all the mitzvot, then we will grow as a people and we will ultimately merit. So once again, perhaps bring one of those paradumot that have been set aside and are being watched carefully as they grow to make sure they don't become pasul. And perhaps we'll use them because Mashiach will come in soon. Thank you all. I open up the floor now for questions, comments, or feedback. Anybody, questions, comments? Rhoda, go ahead. EMTs, yes. What about them? Sometimes an EMT has to deal with, yeah, when you're an EMT or you're a doctor or again, today, the only people who have to worry about coming in contact with dead bodies are Kohanim. Kohanim have to be careful, even though they're already Tamei Meid, because when their parents pass away, they go to the funeral. When Rahman al-Islam, if they lose a child or a sibling, when a Kohen has to go to the funeral and participate in the funeral. Other than that, a Kohen is not allowed to go to a cemetery. That's why most Kohanim and their families are buried right near the outside wall or the gate of the cemetery so that they can go at least in proximity, but they're not allowed to enter the cemetery. A Kohen can only enter a cemetery for a burial of one of his 7 close relatives, 7 immediate family relatives. That's it. Everybody else, we're all Tamei Meid. Once you go to your first funeral, or you're in your first hospital where somebody died, or if you're a EMT or a doctor and you're treating somebody and they die. That's what happens. People die. We're all mortal. Okay. And this is why the Torah provides for this whole purification process. Now, the whole reason we need to be pure is so that we can enter the Beit HaMikdash and bring Karbanot. That's all of the laws of Tuma and Tara that we talk about in the Torah are all related to either the Beit HaMikdash, eating from a karban, or there's one other, eating truma or challah. This is why today, when you bake a dough and you separate this little piece called challah, what do you do with it? You burn it today. Why? Because you are tameh. By touching it, you've made it tameh. Now it can't be eaten. Truma that is tameh has to be burned. That's why we burn it. That's why we also take a smaller portion than the minimum required if we would be tahor, because we don't want to cause truma to be burned any more than we have to take a minimal amount to fulfill the mitzvah. But today we are basically all tameh because we don't have a paraduma. We don't have a way to sprinkle ourselves to become pure again. Yeah, but we may have paradumas that are eligible to be paradumas. We don't have anybody to slaughter them. We don't have a petach ol moed to sprinkle a dam. We don't have a kohen to sprinkle a dam who's tahor. So there are all sorts of requirements that are required before you can prepare these ashes to be used. So it's not so pashut. Yes. Yes, Shiur Kalisher talks about the whole concept of paraduma. Yeah, he outlines the whole procedure. I understand that. We haven't gone through it yet. We haven't gotten there yet. And as I said, I think I don't think we will get through it until Mashiach gets here and we are able to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash. And then we will have to, in order to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, go through this whole procedure. Okay, any other questions? Does that answer your question? Does that help? Okay. It's obvious that a woman doesn't bring a korban pesach. No, that's absolutely wrong. Women don't have to get a circumcision to be eligible to eat a korban pesach. Woman has to eat a korban pesach just like a male has to eat a korban pesach. It's one of the mitzvot. All of the mitzvot associated with Seder night, even though they are positive commandments that are time bound, women are obligated in. That means a woman has to drink her 4 cups of wine or grape juice. Woman has to eat matzah. Woman has to eat her maror. Yes, those woman has to tell the story or hear the story of Pesach related. Why is it? Wait a minute. They're positive commandments that are time-bound. We know that women are exempt from positive time-bound command mitzvah. Time-bound positive commandments. Why are they obligated in the law of Pesach? Because we have a pasuk that tells us, Lo tochal olav chametz, shvat yamim tochal olav matzah lechem oni. Compares the eating matzah and all the other nights, Seder night mitzvot, to chametz. We know that all negative commandments, women are obligated. Women's obligated not to eat chametz during Pesach, not to have chametz. Therefore, by juxtaposition of that pasuk, they're also obligated in all the positive commandments of Pesach.
So let me ask you again, so in the older days.
In the lowest question, in the time of the Beit HaMikdash, women did bring a carbon pesach. That's her question. She asked that question. And the answer is not. They didn't have to bring their own, but yes, they could be counted. They could bring their own, or they could be counted as a group, in a family group. Remember, carbon pesach was brought in a family group. It wasn't every individual brought their own lamb. A family generally brought a lamb for the whole family, based on how many people were going to eat it. It had to be every piece of meat that was available to be eaten had to be applied, had to be called. Somebody had to have signed up for that piece before the animal was slaughtered. So you generally had, I don't know how many people per chabura, per each group, but you had enough people to eat that lamb, to eat a portion of that lamb before it was slaughtered, or goat, or baby goat, baby lamb, kid or lamb. Okay. Any other questions, comments? All right. Thank you all. Have a good evening. Good rest of the week. Best Shem will see you all next week. Laila Tov. Okay, and thank you to my sidekick, Gavriel. Okay, I got to turn the recording.